What's up, everybody? Garrett back here. I want to bring it back to the day of DVD. We're bringing it back to the early 2000s where DVD was king, and we just started upgrading from VHS to DVD, and how huge that was as an upgrade. I mean, when it came to the quality, when it came to special features, menu screens, different packaging, I mean, it was a huge upgrade at the time, and we see this now. We've gone from Blu-ray to 4K, and we're spoiled now as collectors, as horror collectors. We are spoiled with all these boutique labels giving us all these editions, all these movies in such cool packaging, such cool editions of these films that we never thought we would see. But man, it was something special back in the day when it came to DVDs, so much so that a lot of these movies were just so long gone, long out of print, never saw the light of day. And when some of these editions were released, I mean, it was mind-blowing. It made me literally say, holy shit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 10 DVD horror editions that when I saw these things for the first time, or I heard these were coming out, I literally said, holy shit, because it was such a different thing than just grabbing any old VHS box off the shelf. I could have done with the movie itself. It could have done with the packaging. It was just mind-blowing to me at the time. Now, these are in no real order. I'll try to kind of keep them like chronologically, I guess, as a collector. When I first got into DVD, it was obviously late 90s, early 2000s. I can't pinpoint the exact date. I will tell you this, that Fright Night was the first DVD I ever bought. So if that helps us when that came out on DVD, that was the first DVD I ever bought. So it was so cool to kind of have that on a new format. But as I was kind of walking the aisles of these stores, I had a place called Newberry Comics. We had a Best Buy, a Circuit City, Kmart, Walmart, you know, like all these places were carrying DVDs at the time. And I remember coming across this one. And when I did, I was like, holy shit, this is wild. I've actually never seen this before on physical media. And that was Halloween, this Anchor Bay Halloween, this exact edition. Now, what makes this edition so special? This was actually the television cut on physical media. Up until that point, I had never seen this other than on television. So to see that this was actually released on something I could take home and have to watch anytime I wanted, I mean, that was huge to me. It says extended edition, features 12 minutes of extra footage shot for television. So does anybody remember this DVD? I know they put this on like a double pack and all that later, but at the time, this was the first one I ended up seeing in the stores. Now, I was so blown away to actually have this edition of Halloween on physical media. Like I said, this was 2001 that this came out. So early on in the Anchor Bay and DVD era, I guess. So this was really out of the box for a company to do, where they're going to be like, hey, we're going to release the television cut. And that's what Anchor Bay was doing. They were so far ahead of the game when it came to some of these unique releases. And yeah, I just love this edition a lot. And if you guys didn't know, there was actually a Best Buy exclusive version of this, which I didn't know until recently, since doing the Anchor Bay Archives podcast. The Best Buy exclusive actually came with this film cell, this Anchor Bay Halloween film cell. Like, how insane is this? I knew nothing about this until recently, so I got to give a shout out to my buddy Derek over at Convicted Cinephile for listening to me talk about this edition that I wanted, or this film cell to go along with my Halloween television cut. And he said, man, I have this thing sitting in a drawer for like the last 20 years. If you want it, it's yours. So thank you, man, for bringing this. Now I have that complete Best Buy exclusive Anchor Bay television cut of Halloween. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is Anchor Bay as well. Strolling the aisles of Best Buy. I can remember this as clear as day. And the reason I do is because on my last video talking about hard-to-find DVDs, I was at Best Buy and I saw Fright Night 2. Now, like I said, I had already purchased Fright Night as my first edition ever on DVD. So I was like, ooh, Fright Night 2, I'm going to get this to go with Fright Night. I love Fright Night 2. And then I had it in my hand and I saw this bad boy sitting on the shelf. And this was Suspiria. And when I picked this up, I said, what is this? I had never seen this movie before. And when I turned it and I saw this thick case, I was like, holy shit, what is this? Why does this case look so badass compared to all the other ones? This has to be something special. Now, when I flipped it around, what else made it special was it actually had a limited edition number on here. This is literally the first time I had ever seen something numbered like this, which I thought to myself, oh my God, I need to pick this up. There was 60,000 of these made, limited edition, 60,000. This is 38,197. So think about just the day of DVD and what we get now. I mean, that Elm Street Steelbook collection was what, 4,000? And this was 60,000. I mean, it goes to show you how many people were purchasing these things back in the day. But when I saw this and it said it came with like different cuts, documentaries, soundtracks, I mean, this thing was loaded up with like 3 discs in here. And I was like, oh my God, I have to get this thing and add it to my collection right now because I've never seen Suspiria. It had that little Anchor Bay boat on the side, which to me was always a winner, being like, oh, if Anchor Bay approves, I've got to check this out. Now, wow, I'm really keeping this to Anchor Bay because this was another one early on that I saw and I said, holy shit, what is this? And it really had to do with the packaging. Now, I'd had this movie on VHS before. I did a whole video talking about it. You guys can go check out. But when I saw this edition sitting on the shelf, I had seen nothing like this in my life. It is the Evil Dead 2 Anchor Bay tin set. Do you guys remember these tins? I mean, to see this sitting on the shelf, you knew, oh my God, this is an important edition. This is a limited edition. Again, this was limited to 50,000 units. This is 291, so it's kind of a lower of the bunch. But to see a movie that you love put in an edition like this was just so bonkers and out of this world to see this thing sitting on the shelf. Because if you look at the size difference, I mean, it dwarfs a normal DVD. So this was like, oh my God, I need this thing. Now, I did meet Ash or Bruce Campbell in person. So as you can see, he did sign this for me. It says Stay Groovy, Ash, Bruce Campbell. So I did get it signed. But at the time when I saw this thing, I was just so enamored by what I'm seeing here. But what's wild about these is, as cool as the outside is, the inside, they actually have a bunch of stuff, but this is how it was housed in here with these little discs. Now, why is that? This, come to find out, was actually supposed to be something they were going to house VHS tapes in, and DVD format kind of came, and they were like, oh, let's do it for DVD. So they created this little kind of like CD holder thing here to house these things in, which was a weird design. But again, it just makes these editions super cool. Now, as this stuff started to dump out of here, you get the booklet, you get a little card for the game, for the video game. Now, look at this. I totally forgot. I have a picture of me getting this signed by Bruce Campbell just to show proof that it happened. That is wild. I didn't even remember that was in there. And then you get your chapter card with a little card on the back. But yeah, man, like, this Evil Dead tin was just something that completely blew my mind when I saw this on the shelf. Now, looking back on it now, I have all these Anchor Bay tins, which I'm sure you'll see a video in at some point. But these do kind of suck to display. That was the hard thing. You didn't know what to do with it. It was so big, and it's not flat at the bottom, so it's hard to even stand these up. So I have them all in a row, like on a top shelf over there. But yeah, this was another one that Anchor Bay did where, like I said, they were so ahead of the game when it came to these kind of like fancy packaging to try to sell these movies a little bit better, to get people's eyeballs on them. So it's a lot of what you see now when it comes to the physical media and all these other companies putting out these cool editions. Anchor Bay was doing it early, man. And these 3 editions right here were 3 editions that definitely made me say, holy shit. Now, should we keep to Anchor Bay? I mean, I have a lot of Anchor Bay stuff here. I might as well just keep to it, and then I'll veer off. So the next one that made me say, holy shit, was when this came out. And this was the Army of Darkness Director's Cut, the one with the alternate ending and all that stuff. But they put it out in this cool edition called the Bootleg Edition, where it literally looked like you bought this thing off the street. Look at the cover. It says Official Bootleg Edition. And underneath it looks like the Anchor Bay kind of like DVD under there. But this is Bruce Campbell vs. Army of Darkness, the Director's Cut. Now, this was super cool only because you did get that version on a standalone version of the Director's Cut that only came in like that thick double pack, which was another limited rare edition, but they put this one out solo, similar to like the television cut of Halloween, for the Director's Cut and called it the Bootleg Cut. Now, that's what was so wild about this. When I saw this on the shelf, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get this. It felt important. It felt like maybe you shouldn't have this. So people were scarfing it up, thinking that it was like some limited, it's not going to be on the shelf long, you better grab it before it goes away. But very smart Anchor Bay did to kind of push this. As lame as this cover and stuff looks now, with like almost looks like a paper bag or something like that, at the time, it was super cool and people were going nuts for it just because it seemed almost like so underground to have this thing. Do you guys remember this version of Army of Darkness from Anchor Bay, this bootleg edition? Let me know. All right, Anchor Bay is staying. We're going to stay with Evil Dead. Now, again, Evil Dead has come out so many times from Anchor Bay. VHS, DVDs, different kind of DVDs. I must have 5 or 6 versions of Evil Dead from Anchor Bay in my collection. But when this came out, this was mind-blowing. The Evil Dead Book of the Dead. It doesn't work anymore. I think this screamed, or maybe the other one did. I forget. But this was super cool. Now, I have 2 of these, one sealed and one displayed, because I did another video on these things you guys need to check out where everybody's is like ruined now. So the material they used on this has cracked. They're like potato chips. I'm afraid to touch the ones on my shelf because I'm afraid they're going to start to fall apart. So I do have a sealed one that I try to kind of keep locked up just to see if I can preserve it better. But yeah, how cool was this at the time? It's literally the Necronomicon. You open it up and the discs in here. It was wild. Now, if you want to know more about this, like I said, I am a co-host of the podcast, The Anchor Bay Archives, going through all these old releases from Anchor Bay. We're actually going to have the designer of this set and someone who worked at Anchor Bay when this set was made come on the show with us and talk to us all about the making of this set, what it's made out of, how they decided to do it, how they made it, any prototypes out there, any early, designs that they didn't use. There's so much stuff we're going to dig into. That is going to be our Halloween episode. So guys, stick around the channel. I'm going to have the video format here on the channel in October. And I'm also going to have the full podcast on the audio. You can find us on Spotify and on Apple. Anchor Bay Archives. All right, now this is the last Anchor Bay one in my collection. Now, the same thing with Evil Dead. As you were going through Anchor Bay, they released Dawn of the Dead so many times. So many different versions of Dawn of the Dead. Director's cut, Savini cut, theatrical cut. I mean, there was so many that they released, which is wild because nowadays Dawn of the Dead is so hard to get, so sought after. But back in the day, Anchor Bay was putting out Dawn of the Dead all the time. But the one edition that made people say, holy shit, was the Ultimate Collection. That was that Ultimate Edition that looks like this. Now, again, I have 2 versions of this. One sealed. Look, you can see it from Best Buy. This thing cost $38.99 from Best Buy. But this is one of those editions that is just mind-blowing to me. It was one of those editions that became one of my favorite editions ever. Do you guys remember this Dawn of the Dead set? Now, what made this so special? You got all the editions in it. You got all the different cuts of the movie. I'm trying to think how many discs this was. This was 4 discs. This thing wasn't. It was a big fold-out box set. I mean, this was a beautiful set. It looks so slick with just like this black and just the logo in the middle. But then when you open it up, it's so bright and colorful. Check out the innards of this thing and how cool this was. And look at all the features and all the different stuff you get on this for $38.99. Let me see when this came out. It had to have been mid-2000s, I'm thinking. I don't see the date on here, but it had to have been, I don't know, maybe 2003 maybe or something like that. I don't remember. Because this definitely came out after some of these other editions I talked about. But man, this is such an awesome edition. It's still one of the best editions of Dawn of the Dead you can get. Outside the Second Sight one, which is pretty much almost like a copy of this, except they did their own on 4K. But this is still, in physical media horror history, it's one of the best and coolest editions. That's why I did hunt this down sealed for my collection, because I just absolutely love that edition. And I still think it's going to be something that people are going to want in time. All right, so we're done with Anchor Bay. That was a lot of Anchor Bay stuff. I've got 4 left, 4 more picks left. Now this one, when this was announced, it was such a cool idea that I can remember my uncle and I both saying, holy shit, when we saw this thing in like the paper, in like the Sunday Best Buy paper that it was coming out on Tuesday. I was there when doors opened. I picked up one for me, I picked up one for my uncle, and man, we loved this edition. This is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre DVD. It's the meat pack edition. Look at how gross this is. It basically looks like a pack of burger that you would get at the supermarket. Look at this. It says fresh for 30 years. So it was the 30th anniversary edition put out by Pioneer, which is wild to see that Pioneer was putting out Texas Chainsaw back then. And they did a couple times. But this release was so badass. I mean, this, if I take this out, like it literally, you can look at it. It's embossed. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but this is embossed in here. And then you got this, it's almost kind of in that, like, almost that plasticky case. And then you open this up here. Very, very cool edition. I think this is a pretty hard to find edition now, only because they did re-release it a couple times without, I think, the meat portion of it. So at the time, though, when this came out and it was packaged this way, this 30th anniversary meat pack edition, it was such a cool thing. You can open this little chainsaw up in the front. So again, earlier in my collecting DVD career, this was one that came out, and we absolutely went nuts for this thing, my uncle and I. Man, I don't even know what to say. It still holds a special place in my heart, even though I do have Texas Chainsaw Massacre on so many editions, DVD, VHS, Blu-ray, 4K. This one still holds a huge place in my heart. I absolutely love this meat pack edition. Let me know, did you guys ever get your hands on this one? Were you grossed out by it? Or were you like, hell yeah. All right, 3 more. Now this one, I had these movies, I think individually packed, which was pretty cool actually, because it kind of, they all looked uniform. Like I have them up on the shelf, they all look uniform. They had the snapper cases, everything went well. But this was kind of like a huge upgrade from that. And this was the Nightmare on Elm Street box set. Now look at that image. You got one on the front and you've got this one on the back. How sick is that? And then on the side, you've got all the titles. And then when you look at the spine, it creates Freddy. Now this is probably still one of the best Elm Street sets we've ever had. This, and you can't really see it on that shelf over there, but I do have the VHS one that kind of has Freddy across the spines. But man, how cool was this? You got all the movies here in the snapper case. You got some 3D glasses in here. You got some extras in here. Mind-blowing that this came out. We have not seen a set like this from Nightmare since this edition. The Blu-ray set was not great. But the 4K set should be something that may rival this set. But it sits proudly in my collection, and it will be there probably forever, because this holds a special place in my heart. And I know when this came out, horror and Elm Street fans were going nuts. All right, so the last two are kind of more standard editions. There's nothing fancy about the packaging, but when these were released, it was definitely a holy shit moment, because literally these were like the 2 horror movies that were most talked about on message boards and stuff like that. Like, oh my God, we need these on DVD. These things have been lost for so long, and we need these on DVD. And the first one was Night of the Creeps. So if you guys remember the hype behind this one, we did a full episode talking about it. I can link that at the end of this one. But man, we talk about this release and why this was so special. Night of the Creeps was so sought after. So many people had never seen this movie at that point. So for it to finally get a release, and it was probably due to the fans, talking about it so much. Now Night of the Creeps, I think, is pretty well loved across the board and has many releases since then. But to finally get this out was huge. And they did like a little promotion. You get to choose the cover art of this one. And I actually do have one of the cover arts that didn't make the cut, which I do show in that video. But this was the cover art that won, and this is the one that we got. Not my favorite, not what I would have used for Night of the Creeps. I think a lot of those movie posters would have been sufficient for this. But I think what they were trying to do around this time was a lot of these companies were trying to modernize these images in the front to get a younger audience to be intrigued by this. And you'll see this on my next pick. But when this Night of the Creeps one came out, it really opened a lot of people's eyes to this movie. And there was commentaries. I mean, this was an awesome addition to have. Now, let me know, guys, did you say holy shit when they announced Night of the Creeps after that long wait of all of us thinking we'd never see that movie on physical media again? Now, speaking of never see that movie on physical media again, speaking of modernizing the cover to a new audience, my last pick is a movie that you guys should all be checking out around Halloween season. This is The Monster Squad. Man, when this thing was announced, people were going nuts. This was like an anniversary edition, 2 discs, you got a slipcover. But they did modernize the cover here to try to get more people interested. This was a Lionsgate release. They did this with a lot of movies back then. They did this with like Bloody Valentine, American Psycho, The Gate, Cujo. Like they tried to update the image on the front to get a more, younger audience to be like, oh, what's this? But yeah, Monster Squad. This was one we wanted so bad. That is included in that video. We talk about these 2 editions here because they did come out around the same time and they were 2 of the most sought after movies on physical media for a long ass time. And when these were announced, I think the whole community was saying, holy shit, to be honest with you. But guys, that was my 10 movies that literally, when I saw these on the shelf or I knew these were being released, I said, holy shit, because I never thought I would get something this cool in my collection. Now, thank you so much for checking this kind of content out. I love going back in time and talking about this. I have so much of this stuff I can talk to you guys about. But let me know, do you remember any of these editions? Were you collecting back then? Do you have any of these in your collection? And when you saw these for the first time, did it make you want to say, holy shit? Now, I'd love to know down below as well, is there any other editions that would have fit in this top 10 for me? Again, I think it all depends on when we got into collecting. Some of these ones I talked about early, like 2001, if you weren't into the genre or collecting around 2001, these might not make any difference to you. So let me know down below any other DVDs when they were released, you were like, oh my God, this is incredible. I need this in my collection. Now, I've gotten a lot of good feedback about people feeling like they're discovering movies, or when I showcase something, they're like, oh my God, I forgot all about that. I'm going to go back and check it out. I absolutely love discovery and helping people discover these movies once again, and especially around this time of year, because we want to kind of create these watch lists for spooky season. So if you like that kind of stuff and you like to find out about these underrated gems or maybe things you thought you forgot about, I'm going to put at the end of this video my playlist called Rad Lists, where I do a lot of lists talking about underappreciated, overlooked horror movies that I think you guys should check out. Now, gang, thank you for checking this out. This is Garrett at Born2beRad. Make sure you hit that like button, the hype button. If you're not following me, make sure to do it. Show up for one of my live streams and say hello. I love interacting with you guys. And like always, stay